Hey everyone, this is Crime Notes. Welcome to the latest episode of our show. I'm Mary. At the beginning, let's play a 28-second cell phone recording. The start of this recording seems to be some kind of alert sound from the vehicle's dashboard. A few seconds after the alert, there is the sound of a car engine accelerating. Those with driving experience might be able to tell that halfway through the acceleration, the vehicle seems to stop accelerating, but then, just 2 seconds later, the gas is pressed down hard again, and the vehicle accelerates once more. However, 23 seconds later, a woman's scream suddenly can be heard in the recording, followed by the sound of a car crashing and rolling over. You might think this is just a typical traffic accident, but there's a catch. No one speaks in this cell phone recording, meaning it wasn't recorded during a call. The question arises, why would someone in the car record this without any reason? And what happens to the woman who screams at the end of the recording? Behind the last 7 seconds of these 23 seconds, is it just a common traffic accident or a spur-of-the-moment murder plan? To this day, it remains highly controversial. Today, let's talk about the Jeju Island sports car mystery that caused a stir in South Korea. Your likes and support are our motivation to keep updated. If you have any advices for our channel, welcome to share them with us in the comments section. The incident took place on November 10, 2019, on Jeju Island, South Korea. As the largest island in South Korea, Jeju Island has a maritime climate, with no extreme heat in summer and no severe cold in winter, earning it the nickname Korea's Hawaii. It attracts many tourists from around the world throughout the year, including the protagonist of this episode, Miss Zhao Enai, and her boyfriend, Mr. Q. At that time, the couple was driving a convertible, enjoying the cool sea breeze and the warm winter sun. Although the weather was very nice, the relationship between the couple was completely the opposite. In fact, Enai and her boyfriend Mr. Q's trip was devoid of romance. It was merely a breakup trip to commemorate the end of their relationship. Their love was like seashells on the beach, containing no pearls of love, only facing the sands of the sea. Walking by the sea, Enai pretended as if nothing was amiss and asked her boyfriend, after this trip, "Are we really breaking up? Can't we even be friends? We've been together for so long. Why can't you accept me?" However, her boyfriend Mr. Q remained silent, with something weighing on his mind. After dinner, they went to the beach, where Enai habitually picked up her phone to take a photo of her boyfriend. "Hey, look here and smile. I'm recording a video." Strangely, Mr. Q kept mumbling. At 1 a.m., after having a late-night snack, the two decided to drive back to the hotel. Under the moonlight, the quiet country road was scarcely populated. Although the convertible's roof was not closed, the air between them felt suffocatingly tense. Sitting in the passenger seat, Enai seemed to have a lot to say, but swallowed her words before they could escape. For some reason, she turned on her phone's recording function. Suddenly, her boyfriend spoke. "Aren't you wearing your seatbelt?" This comment broke the awkward silence. Just as Enai was about to fasten her seatbelt, a sudden surge of acceleration hit them. Her boyfriend sped up the car, reaching for the seatbelt from the left to pull it across to the right. By the time she was about to click the seatbelt buckle, the car's speed had already soared to 114 kilometers per hour. Then came a strong impact and flipping over, which is the crash and overturning sound heard in the recording mentioned earlier. This is a scene photo publicly released by South Korean media. The white vehicle in the picture is the car Enai and her boyfriend were driving that day. Despite being made of steel in the face of concrete and steel bars, the car became like a lump of walking clay. From the picture, we can see that the entire front of the car has undergone severe deformation due to the collision. The front part of the vehicle was severely damaged, and the stone wall on the pedestrian side of the road was even knocked down. Meanwhile, a liquid was slowly flowing down from the car, and next to this liquid pool lay a woman in a coma. She was Enai, who had been sitting in the passenger seat of the sports car just seconds ago. Looking at the night sky, Enai felt as though she was in a duel with the Grim Reaper. With her last breath, she struggled desperately. Except for slight movements in her fingers, her entire body was unresponsive. Watching her boyfriend making a phone call beside her, Inai closed her eyes a few seconds later and departed from this world. Upon arriving at the scene, the police tested the driver, Inai's boyfriend, Mr. Q, for alcohol. According to South Korean law, he was found to be driving under the influence and faced punishment, including license revocation. After police investigation, it was determined that Mr. Q was uninjured because he had been wearing his seatbelt. However, the situation was entirely different for his girlfriend Inai, who had not fastened her seatbelt. She suffered from fractured shoulder and rib bones, resulting in damage to her lungs and severe brain concussion. After undergoing more than 10 major surgeries, the lively and lovely girl before the accident became a vegetable overnight. 2 years after the accident, Inai's family tearfully pushed her into the crematorium. Faced with her sister's death, Inai's sister, Shiwai, could not accept it. While sorting through her younger sister's belongings with a bleeding heart, Shiwai discovered many suspicious points behind the accident. Firstly, there's the video recorded by the younger sister for her boyfriend, Mr. Q. In the video, the younger sister asks Mr. Q to smile at the camera, but Mr. Q says, "I'm going to turn left." Ironically, the reason for the accident involving the younger sister's car was precisely because she didn't turn left in time, resulting in the vehicle directly hitting the pedestrian walkway on the roadside, leading to a serious accident. The older sister checked the weather conditions on Jeju Island that day and confirmed with local residents. There was no rain, snow, or icy conditions on the road that night. She couldn't understand why, without any interference from other vehicles, the younger sister's boyfriend would hit the roadside. Perhaps while the younger sister was recording the video for her boyfriend, he was already plotting how to harm her. Furthermore, considering Mr. Q's alcohol concentration at the time, his state of consciousness could be considered quite clear. It was just drunk driving, not intoxicated driving. Secondly, 2 days after the traffic accident, on November 12, 2019, when the deceased's parents went to their daughter's apartment to collect belongings, they found that the password lock on the door had been changed suddenly. Initially, they thought it was a robbery, but after checking the surveillance footage, they discovered that their daughter's boyfriend had changed the password. During this time, the daughter's boyfriend also entered and left the daughter's room twice. They couldn't understand why the daughter's boyfriend would change the password temporarily, especially just 2 days after the accident occurred. Mr. Q's explanation that he was afraid someone would enter his girlfriend's room to take things seems dubious at best. The deceased's family suspects that Mr. Q took something he was afraid of, such as evidence of plotting to harm their daughter. Otherwise, why would their daughter start recording audio on her phone after getting into the car, instead of recording a video directly? The only plausible explanation is that she felt threatened with death. Soon after, the deceased's family, suspecting Mr. Q of destroying evidence, applied to the South Korean police for an investigation, receiving a joint petition from dozens of their daughter's friends. However, it wasn't until 2 years later that the South Korean police changed the direction of their investigation from drunk driving and driving violations to suspicion of intentional murder. After locking down basic evidence, the police transferred the case to the prosecutor's office to prosecute Mr. Q. Facing the lawsuit from his girlfriend's family, Mr. Q vehemently denied the accusations. He claimed it was impossible for him to have killed his girlfriend, with whom he had agreed to get married. However, evidence contradicting his claims surfaced soon. One of Mr. Q's friends told the police that Mr. Q had asked him to testify to the fact that he and his girlfriend were in a de facto marriage. What is a de facto marriage? In short, it's when two people live together for an extended period, but haven't registered their marriage officially. Unsurprisingly, Mr. Q's request was promptly denied, as none of the deceased's dozen or so friends had heard about any plans for their marriage. Even more disturbingly, the house where the deceased lived had an 80 million South Korean won deposit, equivalent to over $60,000. If Mr. Q's de facto marriage with the deceased were proven, he would be entitled to this money, while also reducing his liabilities because of this status. The question of whether Inai's death was an accident or not sparked heated debates among South Korean netizens. Both the South Korean police and the Road Traffic Authority have given a pending response, but the National Institute of Scientific Investigation of Korea believes that there was intent on Mr. Q's part. The accident assessment reports from these three entities differ, and even until now, the police have not reached a unified conclusion. Was this traffic accident truly an accident, or was it a carefully orchestrated murder? Is Mr. Q guilty or innocent? Did he indeed exploit the fact that his girlfriend wasn't wearing a seatbelt, finding a motive to commit murder in the final seconds? To answer these questions, we need to dive into the situation at the accident scene and in the final few seconds inside the car. Let's first talk about the surrounding of the accident scene. On the left side of the road at the accident scene were ordinary residential houses of local residents, while on the right side were vast fields used for crop cultivation. The road Mr. Q was driving on that night was mostly straight in the first half, and then gradually curved to the left in the latter half. The location of the vehicle collision was at the corner where a left turn was required. Adjacent to the corner at the time was also a tractor used by residents for farming. Based on the investigation of the scene, the South Korean police reconstructed the process from the vehicle accelerating to the collision and finally flipping over. The vehicle flipped over because it was traveling at excessive speed, and its tires hit the steps of the pedestrian sidewalk sideways, fortunately, without causing an explosion. After understanding the environment, let's now examine the situation inside the car in the final few seconds. To clarify the situation in the final moments, the police collected 3 pieces of evidence. The first was the audio recording from the deceased's phone mentioned earlier. The other 2 were the dashcam footage from the front windshield of the car and the event data recorder, EDR, inside the car, which records vehicle data. According to the data from the dashcam, in the final moments, Mr. Q seemed to be desperately stepping on the accelerator, deliberately heading straight ahead towards the collision. In response, Mr. Q's lawyer argued that it was because the road conditions were dark at the time, and his client couldn't react in time. From the footage, it does seem to be the case. Now let's move on to examine the event data recorder, EDR. The vehicle Mr. Q was driving at the time was a Ford Mustang sports car, equipped with an EDR device that records driving data, similar to what we commonly refer to as a black box. Through the EDR, the police reconstructed the key operational records of the vehicle in the 5 seconds before the collision and rollover. In the first 5 seconds, the road was almost straight, and the vehicle was initially traveling at a speed of 86 kilometers per hour. 3 seconds before hitting the pedestrian sidewalk, Mr. Q accelerated, bringing the speed up to 114 kilometers per hour. 1.5 seconds before hitting the sidewalk, Mr. Q began steering to the left. 0.5 seconds before the impact, Mr. Q turned the steering wheel to the left by 185 degrees, which is a bit more than 1 full rotation. Within this 0.5 second window, the vehicle collided with the pedestrian sidewalk and then rolled over. Mr. Q's girlfriend, who wasn't wearing a seatbelt, was thrown out of the car as a result. Based on this sequence of events, Mr. Q's lawyer argued that his client turned left before the impact, indicating that he had no intention of harming his girlfriend. Furthermore, the EDR also showed that the brakes were activated before the collision, suggesting that Mr. Q attempted to brake upon realizing the need for a left turn. However, the prosecution questioned this defense argument. They pointed out that this model of sports car is equipped with an emergency braking system that automatically detects obstacles, so the activation of the brake lights doesn't necessarily mean Mr. Q actively applied the brakes. To address this question, the South Korean court enlisted a third-party professional testing agency to conduct a simulated experiment. The results revealed that although the vehicle was equipped with an automatic emergency braking system, this system did not activate the brake lights, indicating that it was indeed Mr. Q who actively applied the brakes. However, whether Mr. Q intentionally applied the brakes or did so out of habit remains unclear. The extent to which the brakes were applied is also uncertain. Thus, it appears that the defense has gained the upper hand. But does this mean Mr. Q is innocent? Clearly, it's not as simple as that. Upon careful examination of the simulated experiment data, the prosecution proposed a new perspective from the overall perspective of the accident. After the vehicle reached a speed of 114 kilometers per hour, It was difficult to promptly change the trajectory of the vehicle, regardless of how much the steering wheel was turned to the left. The true cause of the accident was Mr. Q's action of accelerating to 114 kilometers per hour in the 3 seconds before the collision. He attempted to cause his girlfriend's death by reckless driving, just as he said to her at the time, "Are you not wearing your seatbelt?" In the final 19 seconds before the accident, if Mr. Q had truly not intended to harm his girlfriend, why did he desperately accelerate by pressing the gas pedal? This is a question worthy of exploration. In other words, is it possible that Mr. Q knew that turning the steering wheel and applying the brakes at the last moment would be futile actions, with their only purpose being to absolve himself of suspicion? With the defense and prosecution at loggerheads over this matter, how do South Korean netizens perceive it? We received an interesting comment. "Thank goodness this girl recorded audio. This audio is the one we heard at the beginning of the video." However, before this audio clip, there is another conversation between the deceased and her boyfriend, Mr. Q. In the conversation, the deceased initiated by saying, "So, after being with me, you found out that I'm not the type of girl you like?" In response to such a direct question from his girlfriend, Mr. Q replied with a simple, His girlfriend then directly said, "Then let's go home." It implied that since you want to break up, you invited me to the beach for a play and called it a breakup trip to commemorate our 300 days of dating. I don't need your sympathy. Seeing his girlfriend's ungrateful attitude, Mr. Q lightly remarked, "So, this is what you're really like, huh? I tried to lighten the mood, and you turned it around to mock me." Implicitly, he was saying, "I tried to do something nice for you with this breakup trip, and you're not appreciative, but instead, you're raining on my parade." Then came Mr. Q's chilling remark, "Are you not wearing your seatbelt?" which was followed by the subsequent car accident. This case has stirred up quite a controversy in South Korea, especially on Korean online forums, where some people believe that Mr. Q acted intentionally. However, some people believe that after being put a damper by his girlfriend, Mr. Q might have indeed felt a momentary urge to commit a crime. However, this impulse quickly turned into anger, and as he was driving, he had no outlet for his frustration except to step on the accelerator. Unexpectedly, because he didn't have time to make a left turn or brake, he crashed into the stone wall. A South Korean criminal psychologist analyzed the chat records of the two over the 300 days prior and found no clear plan or motive from Mr. Q. Therefore, it's difficult to argue that the final 19 seconds were a carefully planned murder by Mr. Q. In December 2021, a South Korean court rendered a first-instance judgment, finding that the charge of murder against Mr. Q was not established, but he was convicted of driving under the influence and sentenced to 4 years in prison. Unsatisfied with the verdict, the family of the deceased immediately filed an appeal, urging the court to sentence Mr. Q for murder. Mr. Q's defense lawyer at the time had stated that it was disrespectful to South Korean law to consider his client a murderer simply because the victim wasn't wearing a seatbelt. This ignited the family of the deceased's indignation. Moreover, what made them even more angry and disappointed was that in the second trial after the first instance verdict, the South Korean court still ruled that Mr. Q was not guilty of murder. Personally, the statement, "Are you not wearing your seatbelt?" and the subsequent acceleration sound already incriminate Mr. Q. He is highly likely to have intentionally killed his girlfriend. I wonder whether you think Mr. Q did it intentionally or unintentionally. Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section below. This is Crime Notes, and we'll see you next time.